Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Kesed Sabbath Fellowship in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm pleased to be here today. This is the most important series that I have on Revelation. Today's session is on chapter 6, which is the seven seals, 6 of the 7 in this case. And so I'm the son of a pastor. My father, John Blackford, was the pastor for many, many years. I consider him to be the most pastoral of any man I've ever met in my life. And it's hard to walk in his footsteps. But what my father always taught me over the years was hold on to the Bible in one hand and hold on to the newspaper, or in this case a device, in your other hand, and compare and contrast both of them together. The most important thing is that you'll notice that they talk to each other. You're not alone in this. God has given you the Bible for a reason. Sometimes you can tear that message right out of Scripture and place it into the newspaper. Sometimes you can't. But the main thing is you should be checking the Bible, and you shouldn't be leading the information and forcing the information into the situation. But sometimes the Bible matches. So we're going to explore that today in chapter 6 of Revelation, and let's spend some time together. You've already seen some of my other work, and so hopefully you've enjoyed it. You're obviously along for this ride, so let's get through this one. This is going to be an interesting video. This is probably my quintessential work. What I want to be able to do today is prove to you that the 7 seals are like the birth pangs that Jesus described. And Joel describes them, and Peter also. So Joel chapter 2 is quoted by Peter in Acts chapter 2. And by the way, my name is Joel Peter. My father named me that. And so it's rather prophetic that he would name me that. Okay, so let's quote from Joel chapter 2 and Acts chapter 2. After this, I will pour out my spirit on all humanity. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. And also on my male and female slaves. In those days, I will pour out my spirit. I will show wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, and columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. These are birth pangs, people, before the coming of the great and terrible day of Adonai. And Peter quoted it too, and that happened during Acts chapter 2, which is important because that's when God's Spirit was given. Kind of like on the mountain of Moses, when Mount Sinai there, where you have the 10 Commandments given. So just keep that in mind, okay? Now, God gives us signs, and we need to be aware of them. Lights in the sky. So this is way back in Genesis, which is very important. If you understand Genesis, you'll understand Revelation better. He said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs, and we'll see these signs. The seasons, we call them the Moedim, the festivals, the days and the years. This happens to be where Jesus is asked the most important question for an eschatologist, which is, tell us, when will these things happen? The disciples want to know, when is this present world ending, the Olam Hazeh, they call it, the everyday world? When is it ending? And when are we going to feast with you? You know, when are you returning? And Jesus gives them the answer in terms of signs. So let's discuss those. Okay, watch out. Don't let anyone fool you. You'll see false prophets. Okay, that's one. Great miracles. But they're false prophets, but they're doing great miracles. You'll see that in the text. Saying, I'm the Messiah. But they're not the Messiah, but they're saying it. So you'll expect to see it. You'll expect to see other things, leading people astray. And we're seeing that today, people. Hearing noise of wars. Don't become frightened. If you get one thing out of my whole video series, don't be frightened, be edified. God loves you. This is a plan, and it makes sense. It's orderly, people. It's very, very orderly, and you should be edified by understanding some of those things. And hopefully this video series will help you when you see the noise of wars. Trump is negotiating the deal of the century with North Korea right now. Well, don't become frightened. I would become frightened. I don't trust Trump negotiating a deal in Israel. You're not supposed to do that. Just leave it alone. Walk away. Everybody's kicked it down the street. Kick it down the street again. The end is yet to come, but people will fight each other. Nations will fight each other. Increased famines, earthquakes. But these are the beginning of the birth pangs. Okay, that sounds like pregnancy. That's Jesus talking. He talks about these things, and then he continues on here. You will be arrested, punished, put to death, hated because of me, trapped into betraying and hating each other. False prophets will appear and fool many. People's love will grow cold because of increased distance from the Torah. But whoever holds on till the end will be delivered. So you have to hold on. You have to keep your faith strong. That means prayer. That means supplication. That means getting close to God, right in his face, and asking him for help. That means more faith than ever before, because others are going to have increased distance from the Torah. So get close to God's word. But whoever holds out till the end will be delivered, and the good news about the kingdom will be announced throughout the whole world as a witness to the Gentiles. It's a phrase called Melo HaGoyim. Okay, what does that mean in regular terms? That's a Hebrew term, and that was the cross-handed blessing of Jacob on Ephraim and Manasseh in Genesis 48. But in real terms, that means Paul cites it in Revelation, how about Romans 11, that when the fullness of the Gentiles, when the gospel is proclaimed to all the Gentiles, or when all of the Gentiles finally that need to believe have believed, then the end comes like a flood, and it comes fast. So keep in mind, when things happen in God's world, they happen fast because he's outside of time. Okay, immediately after, following the trouble of those days, the sun will grow dark, the moon will stop shining, the stars will fall from the sky, the powers of heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. All the tribes of the land will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with tremendous power and glory. He will send out his angels with a great shofar, and they will gather together. The angels do the gathering. Jesus doesn't do it. The angels do that. Together all of his chosen people from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. That's Matthew 24. So you saw the birth pangs in there, all of these horrific things happening. Is there a pattern in there? Let's discuss the pattern and see if it makes sense. Okay, this is a pregnant woman at 11 weeks. And so it hurts. I mean, being pregnant, having your body kind of ripped apart and expanding, and the weight gain and all the other issues, well, it brings a new life. So once again, with a pregnant pause that we're going through in our life right now, new life is more important. And that's how God renews things, through birth. Okay? So birth is good, life is good. And in this case, renewed life when the Messiah returns is worth the pregnancy and the birth. Okay, let's look at the signs of Matthew 24 compared to birth pangs, okay? So we have food aversions, okay, false messiahs, mood swings, false prophets, abdominal bloating, wars, that's bloating, frequent urination, famines, fatigue, earthquakes, and other things. So we'll just list off these things: fighting, fright, disease, arrest, love grows cold, cosmic signs. These are the birth pangs before birth. You should see the commonality between Yeshua's words of these things happening and these birth pangs. Now, what I help you do is find a pattern, so it doesn't seem random. So people look at you and say, well, whatever happened, I don't understand it. There's nothing that I can understand from Revelation anyway. Why would I even try to read it? Well, through this video series, you might see a pattern of this randomness. Okay, so let's discuss what keeps most eschatologists in the dark. And an eschatologist is someone that studies the eschatos in the Greek. That means the end times, okay? In the Hebrew, it would be the akarith ha-yomim. Okay, two different ways of saying it, but the main thing is it's the end of days, the day of the Lord. And so they believe in a flawed doctrine called... See, it's a veil called imminence. Imminence is like a veil. I cannot see what's going on with that doctrine in front of my face. I have no idea that these signs have significance because I'm saying nothing needs to occur before the rapture. Nothing at all. Well, but things are happening all day long around you, okay? Trump is working on a peace agreement. Oh, the deal of the century. Who cares, okay? Well, we care because it does factor into this. I don't think Hillary would have done something silly like this. She wouldn't think that she could cut the deal of the century. It's a bad deal, and he shouldn't be cutting it. And there are wars, rumors of wars. Iran is constantly on the prowl. Russia's on the prowl. China's on the prowl. All of these countries. Turkey's on the prowl. So keep this in mind. This doctrine of imminence doesn't make sense. The rapture, we don't know the timing exactly, but we do know some basic things that we have to hold on to Yeshua through to the end. Okay, so blast out that doctrine of imminence and stay through this video series and try to listen to me explain how things are happening, especially through this video, Stay with it. Compare the birth pangs that you're sensing, and you're smart. You know what's happening in the news today, and you see what's happening, and compare it to Scripture in a different context. So let's look at it. Okay, it doesn't work that way. Once again, your mother knew she was pregnant. You might be a woman and you know that you're pregnant. So somebody can come up to you and say, you're not pregnant. But if you're pregnant, you know you're pregnant. We already went through the signs. So the main thing is observe and verify these things like I'm doing with you. And then let's see if there's a pattern. Let's look for the pattern. And keep in mind, too, one other little thing. I'm a Sabbatarian. I believe that Sabbath is the holy day. It's the seventh day of the week. And so I like to rest on that day. It does help me to find the patterns by seeing that pattern each week. Is that a veil? Possibly. You can worship Jesus and be a happy person on Sunday. There's no problem. But if you want to see some of the patterns, try observing Sabbath. Just try it. Try it. You'll like it. Okay, one other intriguing thing is a typical birth occurs 40 weeks after conception. Well, if you divide 2,000 years, which is, say, 30 AD when Jesus died and resurrected, to 2030, which would be 2,000 years later, divide that by 40. That's 50 every Jubilee year. 50th year is a Jubilee year. That's interesting. So even if that's all you got out of this, that's something. The Jubilee years are every 50 years, and there seemed to be a pattern in that alone, about a 40-week pattern of pregnancy, so to speak. Okay, now let's look at another part of this veil, where people have this veil over their faces. And look at this particular timeline. This is the pre-wrath rapture timeline, okay? So what they're going to say is the 70th week occurs, which is the last week of 7 years, okay? But they put the birth pangs right there. Well, if you've ever been pregnant, or if you ask your mother, she'll say, no, I had birth pangs, and they weren't Braxton Hicks. I knew I was going to deliver, and it's ridiculous to think that you would have the birth pangs right there as you go in, and you're having massive judgments occurring all around you, and you never had any birth pangs. You just go right into the birth. That's crazy, crazy. So let's look at it differently. Oh, here's another one. Where are the birth pangs with this person? They don't even talk about it because they don't fit into their model. They say the seals are happening at first, and then finally the trumpets kind of take off, and then the final trumpet, but then the bowls at the end, and they're just stacked on top of each other. What would be the point of bowls if they're literally poured on top of your head every 5 minutes? Would you get any message from that? Is there a pattern there? There's really no pattern with this at all. It makes no sense at all. This is another traditional view. This is another one. They put the birth pangs in. So you're already in the birth mode. You're in the hospital. You're dilated to a 10. And like 3/4 through the process, suddenly you start having birth pangs? I don't think so. Okay. So, and close to the midpoint, too, which is ridiculous. And all the seals and all the trumpets and all the bowls are meted out at the same exact time. And keep through all the videos, so you'll see the seals on this particular video, but the trumpets are on the next video starting out. And then eventually the bowls are in chapter 16. So you're going to have to watch a lot of videos to get to that point. Okay? I espouse a linear end time system. I say that it seems like the seals started to open up in 1967, and I'll give you a case for that today. And they magnify. Each one magnifies over time. During the first 3.5 years, the 7 trumpets blow, and about every 4 to 6 months. Okay, and if you do the math, there's 7 trumpets, 42 months. Well, that's about 6 months each. So you could go 4 to 6 months and make it work out. Keep in mind the 7 trumpets are broken into 4 trumpets and 3 woes. And woes are horrible, okay? And some are organic and some are completely bizarre. So we'll deal with those in the next video, okay? The last 3.5 years are the 7 bowls. So if you added the 3 woes from the trumpets together with the 7 bowls and make it about every 6 months, you'd have 10 judgments, and that would take the 3.5 years plus the extra 1.5 years for those last 3 woes. Okay? It seems to work out. It's a picture of Egypt. And so I'd like you to be reminded that there is a place called Goshen where the Jews went, the Hebrews went, to be protected from the judgments against Egypt. Well, Lot had a cave too. So there are these safe places. Now, is that literal or figurative? I don't know, but there are safe places, and you will be told to go someplace, or you'll have the veil over your face and you will stand out and suffer. Okay, so this is about the poorest chart that I can make, but it's intriguing, where I do this linear theory of how things work out. Back and forth, back and forth. There's really no breaks. They just keep on going through. And so the seals open up over time, just like birth pangs would happen over a period of time. And then you go into the tribulation with the trumpets, and then finally head through and finish out the bowls. And there are narrative breaks, so watch out for the narrative breaks. And like chapter 10 through chapter 15 is a huge narrative break, but there's also a narrative break after seal number 6 that we talk about here. So keep that in mind. God has teaching moments. That's what narrative breaks are. And keep in mind, those could be pregnant pauses. So why wouldn't you have pauses with pregnancies? The other thing is the seals. In order to open up a scroll with 7 seals on it, you would have to open all 7 seals. Only Jesus can open the 7 seals. So when people come to you and say, well, you know, the seals open up here, there, and everywhere. No, they all have to be open before you go into Great Tribulation. That's just how it works, and that's logical. So when you look at 7 scrolls or 7 seals on the scroll, you would have to have them all broken, and Yeshua does that, and we'll cover that next video. Okay, we're ready to go into the 7 seals now. We've got a good backstory on this, and we're ready to discuss something that is my quintessential teaching. We lead out with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the green horse. It's chloros in the Greek. So chlorophyll, your lawn, it's green, okay? Green of death. It's not a happy green, okay? So let's discuss, as we're going into these 4 horsemen, the directions. This is the second most critical thing that I want you to learn, the directions. We're going to go back into Zechariah 6 to learn the directions. If you don't know the directions, you're going to be lost through much of Revelation. So we're going to dig through Zechariah 6, 1 through 5 to see the directions listed. I looked up again, and there before me were 4 chariots coming from between 2 mountains, mountains of bronze. And the first chariot had red horses. The second had white. The second black, rather. The third white. And the fourth dappled. It doesn't say green, but I put a green in there. I'm sorry, I took liberty with that, but it is dappled. And all of them powerful. So these are horses. And I asked the angel who was speaking to me, what are these, my Lord? And the angel asked me, these are the 4 spirits of heaven going out from standing in the presence of the Lord of the whole world. Doesn't give the directions yet, though. Let's go to the next page. If this is a picture of the directions, and it's old artwork, at least they understood that they would come from different directions, like the 4 winds would come. Continuing on. Verses 6 and 7 of Zechariah 6, which is similar to Revelation 6 in terms of where it is in that book. Then the one with the black horses is going toward the north, Saphon in the Hebrew, and it doesn't matter that much, but just be aware that it is north, and that's a standard Hebrew word, country. The one with the white horses towards the west, because it doesn't say west in the text, it says Acharith, but you'll see that word used by me a lot. So if I say eschatologist, that's talking in Greek about the end times people that study. And then if I say the Acharith, it's behind you, or it's the west of you, or it's the end times. And the one with the dappled horses towards the south, Timon, okay, so that's typical of south. And then red by default goes towards the east. Okay. And red by default goes towards the east. Okay, that's interesting. So it doesn't say it in the text, but you know it isn't listed, and there's only one direction left. When the powerful horses go out or went out, they were straining to go throughout. And the interesting thing is, you could say these were good horses. No, there's a similar word in terms of halakha that's used, which is walking, so to speak, in the Hebrew. And it really sounds a lot like Job 1 and 2, where Satan says, you know, God says, hey, where have you been, Satan? And Satan goes, well, I've been walking to and fro on the earth. Very similar to that, okay? So they are straining and causing mayhem as they go around the earth. And he said, go throughout the earth. So they went throughout the earth. So those are the directions, and we're going to overlay those directions onto each one of these horses per the color that they are. And by doing so, it kind of lends to the storyline so that you'll know where these problems will occur and what disasters await in those areas. So the first seal is white, west. This is an ancient picture of a rider. He has a bow. He has a crown. That would be a Stephanos. That would not be a king's crown. That would be a winner's crown. He's conquering. That's Nike. And so let's study him out. So I watched the Lamb open the first of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a loud voice like thunder, come. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, Toxon is the Greek word for that. It's only found once in the New Testament, but keshet is found. And the first time is Noah's flood. God puts a rainbow in the sky as a covenant love sign to Noah and the rest of creation. So every time you see the rain end, you see a rainbow. So it's a bow like that. And he was given a crown, Stephanos, not a king's crown, a winner's crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, a Nikon bent on conquest. And I'm wearing tennis shoes right now, so it's like wearing Nike, okay? It's very similar to that word, and it's a conquest type of a word. It's a Greek god, too. Keep that in mind. Then we move forward through Genesis, where I mentioned already that the sign of the covenant was, and God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between myself and you and every living creature with you, all the generations to come. I am putting a rainbow, once again, toxon or keshet, in the cloud, and it will be there as a sign of the covenant, kind of like our church is called Beth Chesed, and Chesed is a loving covenant. It's related to these covenants that God keeps on making and keeping, and we keep on breaking. But it's between God and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth, the rainbow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, and we will too, which is between myself and you and every living creature of its kind, and the water will never again become a flood. At the end, it won't be a flood, it'll be a fire burning things out, because he has to purify us going in for the marriage supper of the Lamb. So that's that word, and it's found consistently in the Old Testament. It's never found in the New Testament other than with this particular writer, and it has to do with this strength, but also there's something very interesting with it. So let's continue on and study this. So I'm saying, as Moshe Dayan handed back the Jerusalem to the Palestinians on Iyar, which is a month of the summer, basically June 4th of 1967, the first seal opened. And I'm saying the spirit of the destroyer, and I'll prove that in a minute, a white horse goes against the Western civilization, bringing something, and this is found in the text of Jeremiah 51, which I'll show you better in just a moment, but it's bending to an anti-God, anti-life, anti-Messiah spirit. What you should be experiencing right now, and you are, and you know it, is that everything that you saw when you were younger is being wiped out. Everything that's godly, everything that's holy, everything that is being destroyed. And Western civilization is literally falling on its own sword. So what you should see is this spirit of the destroyer coming against us. And I'll cite exactly why I call it the spirit of the destroyer, destroying Western civilization. Okay? And he has no arrows, so he has no progeny. He has no children. This is not a children's situation. He's not in it for the life. He's in it for the death. So I'm citing three scholars here. Wilkerson. Okay, so David Wilkerson started Teen Challenge. And what a godly man, a very prophetic man. Dudeman. So he was from Romania. He delivered Bibles and was tortured for delivering Bibles. Groover, he's a prayer walker. I've met the man. I've met Dudeman's grandson too. And I've been able to vet them out. They're very godly men that lived for God. And so they all cited Jeremiah 51 in terms of how it relates to the end times and what we're coming into right now. So let's read Jeremiah 51, 1 through 3. This is what the Lord says. See, I will stir up the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon. And we're like Babylon right now. And the people of Lev Kanai, the heart of Kamai, and I will send foreigners into Babylon to winnow her and devastate her land. They will oppose her on every side in the day of her disaster. Let not the archer, the people defending, people defending Western civilization, they will be bend, or they will have this bending issue. Bend the way, and they're being bent to the way right now. They're literally being bent to this anti-Western civilization, anti-God, anti-life, anti-Bible, anti-everything, anti-family, And instead of adoption, it's all abortion, because it's just all about death right now, and stupidity at times too. Okay, so in the text it says string is bow. That means that we're being bent so quickly, so powerfully to this anti-God system that we don't even have time to string our bow by the time it's over and done with. And you can't continue on. You know that it takes 2.11 births per family to keep civilization going. The United States is at 1.6 births per family. Europe is at about 1.3 births per family. If we didn't have legal or illegal immigration right now, we would be below that number, and we would start falling apart. So the main thing is we need life to continue life, and death brings about death. And this anti-God spirit that's coming against the West is bending us to that way, which is death. Okay, and so you'll see at the end, do not spare her young men. That means that our young men will die in this battle at the end because we've already given up. We've already handed over Western civilization. And keep in mind also the first bend that was listed in the text in the Hebrew was missing its Masoretics marks. Masoretics got together about 1100 AD and determined that we were losing our Hebrew language. And we had all this text that we had to read and understand. So they put the marks into the text. But in this case, they didn't know what to do with that. So they left it alone. And that's another sign that there's a prophetic meaning. I don't always understand what it means, but it means something. Okay. Now we're continuing on with a stern commentary on what this white horse means. And this kind of stays with what my thoughts are. Some consider the rider on the white horse to be the Messiah depicted as a conqueror. And you'll see in chapter 19, verse 11 of Revelation, that he is a conqueror on a white horse, in the sense that his gospel conquers the world. But this only makes him one rider of the four, okay, of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And can you imagine the Messiah as one of those four? Not really. Moreover, the rest of the four horsemen bring judgment, not relief. Better to see this rider bringing judgment in the form of war and conquest. So this is Stern. He's a messianic scholar, and I cite him all the time because he's probably the best at this. Okay, the other thing is that when we move between this horse and the next horse, you'll see the word allos. So just watch for it. It means just another horse. So they're very similar. So keep in mind, these are all spirits being sent out to destroy things, not to build things, or conquest, but it's not a good conquest. Okay, now let's look at some things that have been occurring during the time frame. And so we're moving forward from this time frame of 1967. But what happened during that time frame? Well, first, let's go back and look at the blood moon eclipses. There was 1493, 1494. Well, that occurred as Columbus was returning from finding a place for people to live. You know, we live here in America. And so he was a Messianic. He was Jewish more than likely. And he sailed off on about Av 9 of 1492. And then the blood moons happened. So that would be an eclipse of Passover, Sukkot, Passover, Sukkot in 2 successive years, 1493, 1494. And so that was a sign of America and a place for people to worship together. So we have blessings for Jews and Gentiles as America was found. Okay, and founded. So then the next one after that was 1948, 49, and that doesn't match up with any patterns other than Israel was founded during that time frame. But the 67, 68 is when Jerusalem was conquered. And so that was another tetrad of blood moons on these special Jewish feast days. And also there was an increase of rains during these time frames too, which is very, very interesting. So in America, what you would notice is as Jerusalem started to be built up, then in America, you'll notice these Jesus people coming over and Jews coming over, many, many converts from 67 through 73. It's just interesting to note that God does things for the Jews and the Gentiles, usually equally. Sometimes it's symbolic on one side, sometimes it's not. This happens to be the blood moon tetrad of 67 and 68, and those are the dates and things like that. So it happened after they had won the war, but it happened during the right time frame. Okay, we're ready to move on to the second seal. This is east, just like the Zechariah 6 directions, and it's a red horse, so it should be east of Jerusalem. So let's figure that one out. If the first one, white, was against the west and started about 1967, then let's look for the east, and let's see a war that never ends going east of Jerusalem. So when the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another, remember I said allos in the Greek, okay? This is just another angel, another spirit going out, rather. And the horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace, shalom, from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword, a Machaira. Okay, so let's discuss swords. This is a large Machaira. And a Machaira is designed to kill. If I'm a soldier, I run along and I stab people, and I'm just a soldier. This would never be given to leaders. They would have something much more important than this. It's got one single blade, so notice there's nothing on the top, just the blade on the bottom side here. And I would stab people and I would hack people, and it's just a general killing sword. It has meaning, but you'll see with the fourth seal that it's a completely different sword. It's a supernatural sword. So this one's for killing. So it's a Machaira in the Greek. I'm stating that based on what my research is, that on 9/11 of 2001, that opened the second seal. And that caused a war east of Jerusalem. As the terrorists hit the Twin Towers in New York, a Machaira war began with radical Muslims east of Jerusalem. So by 2003, George Bush said that he heard the voice of God. He heard something say, go invade Iraq. And he did, just like his daddy told him to do. And that war has never ended. I mean, you look at Afghanistan and Iraq and now Syria and Libya and all these places. What have they accomplished? Nothing, just killing people. That's it. That's the Machaira. So when you see that sword in action, you should see just general killing, okay? And so we've accomplished nothing. Now, the intriguing thing is that's an Adar 2, 15 of, Adar, the last month of the Hebrew calendar, which would be where we are right now. I'm filming in March, coming up on the 15th. So that would be like a March 15th, but it's the second Adar, which is, it only happens about every 3 years. That was 3/19 of 2003 is when this started. And right now in my soul, I believe that we're having a second Adar this year, and that there could be like an Ides of March type of a storm coming as Trump is negotiating with the devil right now. So this was another horse, a red horse, east of Jerusalem. There's a picture of the Machaira. That would be more what we would be dealing with at that point in time. It would be a very wonderful blade to be able to use for warfare. Okay, there are other things that occurred during this time frame too. There are the Shemitah years that Jonathan Cahn's been talking about, and Jubilee years. Now, Jonathan doesn't talk about the Jubilee years, so he's kind of out of sequence. Shemitah is every 7 years, and then after you have 7 years of 7, then you get out to 49 years and you have the cap year, that Jubilee year, the Yovel year, I could also call it. And I'm stating that I believe the Jubilee year is 2017 to 2018. And we're still in that time frame, because if there is a 13th month, then you would find that the end of that would be around April 18th-ish, okay? And that's from the Harbinger, his book. He does cite one thing, that during the second seal time frame, that you'll see the bricks have fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones, and the sycamores are cut down, but we will change the cedars. That's actually a curse. But our president and our other leaders cited it as a blessing, and they didn't really understand prophecy. You never cite a curse as a blessing when it's a curse. Okay, that means that your bricks fell down, but we're going to replace it with beautiful stones. But our sycamores, the cheap trees, fell down, but we'll change it out to cedars. Well, when God is bringing judgment against you, I don't care what you build with. Judgment is coming, and so it's a curse, and it was a curse to Israel at that point in time, and it could be a curse to us as our leaders cited it. Another thing, remember when I mentioned Meluha Goyim to you in these videos? Wycliffe Publishing announced by the year 2025 all the necessary languages will have been done and translated of the Bible, thus fulfilling Mark 13:10 says it the best, that the gospel must be published to all nations before his return. The return of 2030 is more plausible now. I'm not predicting a date or anything like that. He could come sooner than that. But it is intriguing that by 2025, everything's published. It's break time right now. I will continue on with the rest of chapter 6 in just a minute. Once again, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Kesed Sabbath Fellowship, and thank you for your time.